Hi everyone, it's time for another governance update from VLGA Connect Summer Series. I'm feeling underdressed. Stephen Cooper, what's going on?
Chris, what are you doing? Summer holidays are over. We are back into the business of governance. I thought it was important that we frock up and show that we mean business. And what are you doing?
You were shaming me because it's summer until the end of February, is it not? Correct me if I'm wrong.
It is summer, but once again, I think not for the first time, you and I have gotten to a very pedantic discussion early, and it doesn't bode well for the future.
Indeed. Well, I do like the look. I like the tie. Just don't make a habit of it.
You can be assured of that.
All right, let's have a chat about what's been happening in governance since we last spoke. And one thing I wanted to highlight, Steve, is last week at the last council meeting for the Interim CEO at the City of Ballarat, there was some really interesting, important and useful information tabled. Janet Dorr, the CEO there, has completed a governance and culture review with a 16-point action plan. And I think it's just really good reading for anyone with an interest in governance processes, in culture, in organisations today, and some of the issues that are really relevant right now in a 21st century way.
Oh, look, for a whole lot of reasons, Chris, and I'd agree. And I think we can call it the Halliday Report because that's the name of the author. And the other thing that's really important is that it was, when you alerted me to it and I went Googling, it was very easy to find by just Googling Ballarat Council Governance Review, and up it popped.
Yes.
I thought one of the really striking things, Chris, that in the introduction, it uses the phrase talking about staff of their sense of dignity, respect and self-worth in the workplace, which has kind of been a recurring theme over the last few weeks, as you would well know.
Very much so. And if you look at the action plan, it's neatly divided into 4 areas: the working environment, behaviours, leadership and governance. And there's a couple of things that jump out to me there. I deliberately used the phrase 21st century before because it's talking about 21st century leadership and senior staff having joint goals, accountabilities, etc., which is really important in today's organisations.
Oh, absolutely, Chris. That sense of unity and the functions of senior leadership and the importance of their roles on setting culture are just absolutely vital. And I thought you were going to go there earlier, but just extraordinarily strong links to the findings of the VLGA report into sexual harassment in local government, just a recurring theme about the importance of actively managing culture.
Yes, you're right. I knew you were drawing that link for me, and I was coming to it. Under governance, it talks about recognising and adhering to the positive duty obligation under legislative responsibilities for a range of things, including that positive duty conversation we had on this program with Kristen Hilton and Andrew Greaves very recently about the VLGA report. Look, I'm starting to feel like I've got what Joe would have said, foot on the sticky paper. I just think the sector needs to be saying more about how it's going to take account of this report and its outcomes and what it's going to do about it, the leadership.
I think you're quite right, Chris. And it's isn't it an interesting and like nuanced and sophisticated leadership is required, because on the one hand, we're talking about positive duty and culture, but positive duty, but on the other hand, we're talking about culture. And I think we well know you can't manage culture as a project plan, but we would typically manage our compliance functions with a project plan. So, as I said, there is this level of sophistication required and real rigour starting at the leadership level, but really for anyone who's a leader in an organisation about how they actually contribute to that culture, which will provide a sense of dignity, respect and self-worth, psychological safety indeed, for everyone working in an organisation.
Well said, Steve. And the other thing that occurs to me is what a gift this is for an incoming CEO. So Evan King at Hepburn is moving to Ballarat at the start of March, I believe. This is all laid out for him as a roadmap, and I just think that's a gift.
I would have presumed it's a good space for a new CEO to be in. I certainly can't walk in Evan's shoes, but where there is a clear expectation that change will be made, that culture will be set, that there is a report that needs to be acted on, and good luck to Evan with that. I think one of the really interesting things for me there is, though, that culture can be multi-generational, and that sometimes the dynamics that create culture in any organisation can find a way of recurring, even when you've got new people in place. And actively identifying those things that are sort of under the waterline that are drivers of culture, even with such a report in hand, is a monumentally significant piece of work.
So just before we move off that, the other little piece of news is with Evan going to Ballarat, Bradley Thomas at Hepburn has been appointed by the council as the interim CEO. So congratulations to Bradley, who's very well known around the governance circles as well.
Nice work, Bradley, and he's a great representative of FinPro and a real contributor on the Local Government Act Project Control Board.
Speaking of which, nice segue, that PCB met this week for an update on where the Act implementation process is at. What are your takeaways from that, Steve?
The first one, Chris, was a bit of homework for me, that I know that the information regarding the background information regarding regulations on land information responsibilities of local government is on the Local Government Victoria website. And in the interest of disclosure and authenticity, I've got to say I haven't read them yet, but there are, on a topic that would seemingly be so benign, I think in another way you might describe it as 98% boring, 2% sheer terror. There are councils.
Say something else then. Yeah, okay. 98% boring and 2% sheer terror.
So the issuing of land information, you would think, should be a routine process of disclosure. Yeah. But every so often, something goes horribly awry because of the fact that people getting this information are able to rely on it. And if the council hasn't done its due diligence, there are liability issues at play. So for those who have responsibility in that area, I would say read carefully.
Steve, we've mentioned many times the Code of Conduct is due on the 24th. The Community Engagement Policy is due on the 1st of March. I think the gift policy not far behind that. But in terms of milestones for this next 12 months, there's a bit of a gap in there, which I assume is by design to recognise that councils, there are new councils, a lot of strategic work happening, budgets to do, etc. Is that fair?
I think it is, Chris. The strategic work is significant. I'll be really interested to get some feedback on how councils in this period up until, September, they'll be all locked away, reshape their thinking in association with that broader integrated strategic planning framework. In one sense, the requirement to do a budget by June won't really change, but it'll be fascinating as to how the information associated with, asset management plans, financial plans, rating and revenue strategy forms a more holistic sort of thinking, not to mention, the work that's done on community vision, informing the council plan and the budget. So this is very early days, but it does require a completely different mindset to starting with a pot of money and then sort of shoehorning in what we can fit in and what we're able to do with that amount, which might sound a bit pejorative and probably is slightly unfair to most councils, but when it's boiled down simply, is what the 1989 Act allowed.
Underscores the importance of this strategic planning and reporting framework that sits over all of that, of course. And before we started recording today's show, Steve, I made the comment, the penny just dropped for some reason. I've been thinking around this whole principles-based approach because a lot of people are saying we don't really 100% get what it means for us and the way we operate. I've been thinking of it from an officer perspective. I haven't really thought about what it means for councillors to be operating in a principles-based environment. Do you think that's something that needs consideration?
Oh, definitely. And I think, I would expect, Chris, we will talk about this more during the year, if Catherine keeps letting us do this weekly show. that notion of what the various accountabilities look like. We've had some terrific workshops that we've been doing as part of the induction with a range of councillor groups. And one of the dynamics that has fascinated me is that there's been an element with returning councillors quite reasonably of thinking, yeah, been through this process before, but the Act has so changed their obligation. It's so much more demanding on them to work on rather than in the organisation. The issues that you talked about in terms of that positive duty of care, and they're almost by osmosis, although I think it's deliberate, there is a greater impact and emphasis of the role of councillors on culture. But also in a principles-based Act, the decisions aren't laid out for them so much. So, for example, and we've talked about this before, 1989 Act, conflict of interest, go through the checklist, tick the box, no, there's no conflict, you're only a member of the club. Mm-hmm. Now, particularly on those general conflicts, what would a reasonable person say? And there's some real distinctions. Are you a player who might, suit up 6 times a year? Are you an occasional volunteer? Are you there regularly? What would a reasonable person say if you are making a decision as a councillor in relation to that club? Councils will really have to, rethink. I could probably, if you've given me another opportunity, confidential information is another one. There's a whole lot of information there, but fundamentally confidential is information that a councillor ought reasonably know is confidential. And I think, Chris, in the past, for officers, there's always been that notion that if in doubt, report. If in doubt, exclude yourself. For the elected, there is political reasons. It might have seemed a bit more arbitrary. So it's really sheeted back a lot more responsibility for the councillors to pay attention to the purpose of those various sections.
Is that something that might come up at your Fast Track Councillor Leadership Day on the 5th of March?
Beautiful work, Chris. I didn't think we were going to talk about that just yet. And in fact, I was going to talk about something else. But yeah, it will. And so on the 5th of March, VLGA Mayor and Councillor Fast Track event, fabulous panel. We will be talking about leadership, particularly with an emphasis on mayors, but any councillor will benefit from that. We've got a great panel. We will talk about code of conduct, but we're not interested in that compliance element. Really, it will be about making the code of conduct a document that supports effective communication between councillors. And our final session, we've got a terrifically diverse panel to talk about where to from here, with topics around stakeholder engagement, community engagement, how to set the council up well through the rest of this year to function most effectively, because we've got to break out of this mould that we've been in, for the last 12 months of, we're in the phase of implementation. At some point, we've got to actually live with the work that we've done. How do councillors function effectively? So we are really looking forward to the day. And
of course, you've got the Minister for Local Government to open that session. So your AGM, the VLGA AGM, a quick plug for that as well before we go.
Yeah, notices have gone out, Chris, late in the day on the 25th of February. So all councillors will get a notice. If you're a councillor at a member council, you get to vote. But you also get to hear through the President and CEO's report what we've been doing, and hopefully leverage off the work of the VLGA as well as possible, because ultimately, you can have these meetings and go through the admin processes. The main game for us is supporting good governance in the sector. So, for councillors get along and make connection. There is a special resolution that we just need to get through, which is a bit of admin stuff. So all those business papers have been published.
All right, and check the VLGA website for details on all of those upcoming events. Now, Steve, if you like, from next week, I could start rotating through my tie drawer, which is a very large drawer, and it has about 80 ties in it, and I haven't had an opportunity to wear any of them for a long time. Is that a good idea? Should I do that?
Can we leave it to the mailbag?
Okay, give it some thought.
Let the viewers decide. This is an era of increasing community empowerment. And, well, in fact,
it's principles-based.
It is. Will they be interested? Will they care?
On that note, I think we're done here. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank goodness for that. Thanks, Chris.
That's the governance update for another week from VLGA Connect. Thank you for joining us. Do come back if you dare. We'll see you again soon.